This is EmergencyFD Storyline.
These young guys, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me. This, somebody mangling an automobile or decapitated or burned, and they say, there's nothing to it. Well, let me tell you, I've been retired 7 years, and it's more vivid to me now, some of the things, than back then.
One retired firefighter shares his memories and the cost of being a firefighter. The views expressed on this program are from the guest and the host only, and do not necessarily represent the views of any government agency, private company, or public service. EmergencyFD Storyline's focus is to tell the stories of those in the fire service and to highlight what matters to our first responders. I'm your host, Tom Mann. The costs of being a firefighter. Often we think of firefighting as the excitement of the ride down the road at high speeds, or running into a burning building when others are running out. It is an adrenaline rush on a job that can only be rivaled by a fighter pilot flying at Mach 2. But being a firefighter is more than the rush. At times, it is raw, gut-wrenching emotion with a high price to pay. I learned this fact by watching a lieutenant on Engine 7 in Memphis. He's been called a firefighter's firefighter. The new guys call him one of the legends. I call him a friend and a man who opened his heart and life to me at one of the most trying times in his career. Always the professional, a team leader, and willing to share his heart. His name is Jim Cunningham. It's been 20 years since I talked with Jim, and now I share it with you as we discuss his career and the cost of being a firefighter. Well, one of the first engine houses and group of firefighters I got to, know and be around was the Sevens engine house, and it just happened to be on the B shift. And for some reason, I kept gravitating back to that engine house. I'm not sure exactly what it was. It may have been the fact that these guys were funny. They seemed to make the job fun, but at the same time, there was a professionalism there that I got to witness through a number of years. And one of the reasons is the gentleman that is with me, they call him a legend in the fire service, and the younger guys sure do. And they're the ones with him, as Lieutenant Jim Cunningham, now retired. Hard to believe that you're even retired, but it's good to have you right here and sitting in your home talking to you.
Thank you, Tom. It's been 7 years, retired 7 years, but it
It's
seems
been
like
7?
yesterday.
No.
Yes.
I keep thinking it's like a year or two.
It feels like it. That's why I say it's hard to believe.
If we can just talk from the beginning, how you got in firefighting, where were you first assigned? When did you start, and how did you get there?
At the time, I was working and going to school, 10 hours away from graduating with a degree in marketing. And a real good friend of mine, Larry Mathis, came to me and said, "Can you ever see yourself sitting behind a desk?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, look, they're fixing to hire some firemen. They hadn't hired in 4 years. What do you think about trying it?" Okay, let's go. So we went. There was 2,000, I think, that went through the agility test. And it just so happens Larry and I ended up in that class of 76 men. That's how I started. I said, well, I'll give it a shot, And I knew I was claustrophobic. I said, I don't know if I can ever put this mask on, air mask. Well, lo and behold, you really didn't put it on back then. One time, and it was actually then you had to demand the air. It wasn't a demand. It was a demand. Long you had to ask for the air. So I asked for it so much I ran out in 5 minutes. I was just, and I thought I can't do this. And he pretty much talked me through it. He did. He talked me through it. Well, lo and behold, Larry was kind of scared of heights and going up a 50-foot ladder straight up in the air in the 100-foot aerial. And I kind of talked him through that. So we both. That's the beginning. So that's how we ended up in the fire service. And
what year was that?
1977.
Okay, 77.
September of 77, and the good thing about that was, there hadn't been any classes in 4 years. So when we came in the engine house as rookies, we were treated with 4 years of pent-up, I don't know how
aggression.
Yes. So we were pretty much, but it was great. We both ended up coming out of the fire academy and going to the same engine house. He went to Engine 17 and I went to Truck 8. And I'll never forget the night of graduation, the deputy director came to me and said, son, you know who your captain is? And I said, well, no, sir. He said, God help you. That's his exact words. And come to find out, he was probably the toughest man I've ever been around in my entire life. Toughest fireman. Didn't speak to me for the first 3 months. But just tremendous fireman, unbelievable. And Larry on the pumper, he had one of the best officers he could. I mean, we just fell into it. Good group of men, and we learned to do the things the correct way. And that's what made a big difference. That first day, you start that first day, even though they're not speaking to you and you're the butt of all the jokes, you're learning. And
you can pass that down later too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Well, that Sevens engine house was famous for passing things down.
A lot of things. And then, how many years were you?
I was
on the
there.
truck?
I was there for 7 years, I believe 7 years. And that's one thing that I tell everybody today is, when you're a new fireman, I think every one of you, the probationary men, should go to a truck company, because you've got to work individually. If you know anything about fire service, truck men, it's a difficult job, and they're working on their own, and you have to learn and adapt. Not that you don't on an engine company, but it's just all the stuff that's involved in doing truck work. And you may never get praise for it, but they know if you don't do your job. And the one thing that I loved about that, I loved carrying that ladder and that hook, that pike pole. They kind of called me, my nickname was Sam, because at the time there was a running back, Sam the Bam Cunningham, that played for the New England Patriots, I think it was New Buffalo, whatever. Anyway, so my nickname was Sam. So I'll never forget Robbie Martin. You looking out of a window, and of course the truck's always behind the pumper, and they'd already laid the line, and he was hanging out the window. Sam, where are you? So I said, I'm coming. And I think that was what really, I'll never forget that day, because he knew he could count on me. And I was new, and he knew I was coming with it. He didn't yell out, hey, we need something in here. We did the Sam. And I bowed up a little bit, that's great. Maybe I'm finally fitting in. Then you get back to the engine house and they're, throwing mustard on you. I mean, just something. But it was such a good group of guys. And of course that was before the strike.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And we were still on probation. Here Larry and I had decided on careers, and we'd been on about 9 months, and we got fired, probationary class, and so it was a tough time. But of course, all the firemen were fired. When they went to put everybody back to work, they said everybody except that class, probationary class. We walked out. Well, when it came time to go back to work, we'll hire you back, no probationary class. They said we're not going back to work without this class. That's how we stayed on the job.
Oh,
so,
wow.
76 of us, yes. Very sad. It's to everybody.
Yeah. That was a difficult time because you had the police and the fire.
Right.
And hearing that was kind of a...
Well, we went back, and then less than a month later, the police walk out again, so we walk out again. And that was the day I bought my first house. I was moving in my first house, my wife and I. So here I am, unemployed. Which, and moving in your first house, and of course then we were making, I think my I still have my check stub. First check, it was 2 weeks, $278 for 2 weeks.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, you look back on it now.
Yeah,
retrospective.
Yeah. But it was trying, but it worked out. It worked out. And
so you're the 7 years on truck. How did you wind up getting over to the sevens? Was there anything in between that? What was next?
Oh yeah, I was promoted, and during that 7-year period, I volunteered to go and teach a fire academy for one class, and I went out there and taught truck work, ladder work, rescue, stuff like that. So I thought that'd be good. I think everybody should do that, be on the other side of it. Anyway, lo and behold, I took the promotional test and was promoted, and 2 of us were assigned to training, and I did not like that at all. I was on the company 2 days as a lieutenant, which I was too young. I know that. After working 2 days, they assigned 2 of us to the training center. 2 guys left the training center. So I ended up out there for a couple of years. And then I went to 13's engine house that's in Overton Park. Back then, newer lieutenants worked under a captain. And to get your own company, you pretty much had to show out a little bit, and prove that you could do the job. I ended up under Captain Ed Evans there. Great fireman. They were putting a high-rise rescue team together at the sevens. I loved the sevens. When I was under the captain, I was always buffaloed out to ride somebody on vacation. Well, every time there was an opening at sevens, that's where I wanted to go. That and the snorkel was there. Put this high-rise rescue team together, and so I said, well, I want to be a part of that, and it's going to be at the sevens. Well, why would you put more training on the busiest engine company, the busiest engine house in the city, and one of the busiest in the nation? I mean, but that's the way it worked out. So here comes my buddy Larry Mathis again. Hey, I hear they're doing this at the sevens. You want to be a part of it? I said, yeah. So we threw our names in the hat, and that's how he ended up lieutenant on the engine company on the C shift, and I was lieutenant on the engine company on the B shift. That's essentially how we ended up at the sevens. And
when was that? About what time?
I think it was 1980. It's 1986, I believe, is when we all went there. It was a whole change up, and a lot of guys were upset about it. They had been there for years up there at the sevens, but at that time, not many people stayed for a long time at the sevens. I mean, it's just it wears you down. The whole house, privates, drivers, paramedics, lieutenants. Everybody was there for the high rise. So he had a good group of men. I mean, you're not going to volunteer to go to the sevens. Nobody volunteers to go to the sevens. I mean, you got to have a mental evaluation if you do. But anyway, we're just surrounded by great guys. I mean, everybody was a volunteer. Physical fitness kept up, and we loved the training. And anyway, that's how we ended up at the sevens.
You go from truck, now you're a lieutenant on a engine company.
Right.
This is sevens, and as I've told people before, this is almost like the pre-sort that was the elite crew, and I remember that.
That's exactly where it came from. It not only was high-rise rescue, we also did confined space, the minor league of the start of the SORT program. It was.
And I can remember you guys doing a lot of demonstrations, different places, in the on a helicopter, rappelling out of a helicopter, and I've heard even some stories about you. I think one time you were going out, or you were about to go out of a helicopter. I think it's over in Mud Island, and good spot where they filmed The Firm and that kind of thing. You were getting on the roof. Is that what it was?
Well, we actually were practicing a hover jump, simulating jumping onto a high-rise building or being lowered, if you could get low enough to actually jump off the skid. And there's certain procedures you go through. Police department TAC team is flying, and it's the rappel master, a guy named Bulldog. He's the rappel master. So anyway, we're hovering. We're going to skid jump over the top of the tram, on the top of the tram, which is over the channel off the river, about 100 feet, maybe more than that. I don't know. And we had gotten the word, so we're standing on the skids. He gave us the signal to unhook our carabiner to make the jump, and it's only going to be about a 3 or 4 foot jump. That's how, a pilot's hovering right over it. And the minute he gave us a signal to jump, the helicopter caught a little gust, and it floated out about 5 feet, only about 5 feet to one side. If I would have jumped, it would have been jumped into the river, and that would have been the last of old Jim Cunningham. And I remember he grabbed and made the signal to stop. If I hadn't looked, I was gone, because I was doing what I was told. He said go, and I'll never forget. He grabbed my arm. I wasn't going. I mean, I saw that, but he grabbed my arm, and his eyes were as big as dinner plates. I've never seen, and this is a big old tough man, I mean, but it shook him. That was with the police TAC guys. We would do some demonstrations, on Firefighters Day and all that kind of stuff. And I actually became one of the rappel masters. I said, I'm going to be in charge of this. I don't want to, be. But
nobody else falling off.
Right. But we actually had some good times, and had great pilots. We had an interesting story. One of the guys on my company, when you're rappelling out of one of these helicopters, there's a procedure. When you're told to go, you got one man on each side of the helicopter, so you rappel at the same time. You come off the skids at the same time, so it won't. I mean, it's tough on that helicopter, and it's an old Huey, Vietnam era, Huey. One of my men, when he rappelled off, you have to open your hands and slide so you can get below the helicopter and then start your rappel. His helmet strap fed into the carabiner that he was sliding from. So essentially he was hung. He was hanging himself underneath the helicopter. We didn't know. We were sitting in the helicopter. Nobody knew what was going on except the guys on the ground were telling the pilot, well, he couldn't even sit down without crushing him. He was right under it, and we couldn't pull him back up. He was strong enough. He pulled himself up and unhooked that strap. I don't know how he did it physically. We tried to recreate the thing, couldn't do it. And we got on the ground, and he just looked at me, and he said, I don't like that. I said, well, you just scared everybody. But it's just one incident, that. But we trained on that too. And essentially, the high rise, if you have a fire, and you come down, they're going to set you down on the top of a roof at one of these buildings downtown if you need to. However, if that building was actually engulfed or whatever, and there's enough updraft, you would have to rappel down. Instead of just being set down. So that was a part of it. And we would, rig up Stokes baskets for rescues. And it's funny you said that about this high-rise. You train for all of this, but you don't train for the emotion. In our first run, a high-rise team was actually called out. I mean, we hadn't even heard it on the vocal alarm. We have a high-rise incident. Okay. A party has fallen out of a window on the 17th or 18th floor downtown onto a parking deck. Well, it was the River Terrace at that time. I don't know if it is now, but they've got like 6 floors of parking decks, and then the hotel is on top of that. It's one of those deals where you have to figure out what you got, what you need to do. So we all rigged up, we get everything, and we go up there, and lo and behold, it's a little 2-year-old St. Jude patient that has fallen out of the window on the 18th floor and hit the parking deck on the 8th floor. Still alive.
How many stories?
It was at least 10 stories.
Still alive.
The baby was still alive. Little St. Jude patient. There was no rappel or anything. It was just the fact that they knew it was a high-rise building, the dispatchers, and they said, well, they've had somebody fall, and they're still up some elevation, and they couldn't get the ambulance up there. So we, worked on the child and packaged the child up and took him down, and he did not survive. But you just think, okay, this high-rise rescue, and just nobody was prepared for that. Mentally prepared for the emotional part. I mean, because it was just, for instance, when I got up there and I looked on the parking deck and I thought, this is just, this is horrible. It's horrible. But I think that was our first, and we made several. We were called on the Memphis, Arkansas bridge, the I-40 bridge, one night, cold. It was at Thanksgiving. And I got out there, and the police were on the bridge, and they said, we've got a jumper. Okay, if he's jumped, what are we here for? I mean, he's in the river. Well, the guy hit on a platform like 20 feet below, a piling, I guess, or one of the pilings for the bridge. He had broken his leg when he hit, and he tried to kill himself. So they had been talking to him. They called us. So we get high-rise team out there. We don't know if he has a weapon. We really don't know. That night I was riding Battalion 4 out of rank, chief, but they dispatched me with my crew. So I'm looking over, and I'm trying to establish. I said, you got to do what you need to do. So I kind of established a rapport with him, and I said, mind if I come down there with you? Well, he said, yeah, okay. We rigged up the rappel lines, and I went down to him, and I was just sitting there talking to him, and it was holiday time. He was despondent, probably been drinking. He said, I don't have anything to give my kids for Christmas. He said, I just don't, I'm a failure. They're better off if I'm dead, and I said, man, we just developed a rapport, and he finally allowed us to bring him up. So Bobby Qualls, I said, he came over. He rappelled over. We put a harness on him and brought him up. They put him in a car, and we were gathering our things. A policeman came over to me and said, hey, this guy wants to talk to you for a minute. So I went over to talk to him, and he said, thank you. And I said, I just want you to be okay, I mean, it's just not, it's not that bad. He said, but look at you. You got clothes. Look at those nice gloves you have. Well, they were our rappel gloves. I took my gloves off, and I said, here, you keep those gloves. He goes, I ain't never had anybody give me anything except a hard way to go. And I said, wow, look, man, you just, I'm glad you're okay, And I walked off, and later on, of course, the news media was out there, and they're, interviewing and everything. And I tried to get the info. We all got back to the engine house, and we said, let's do something for this guy, for his family. And, of course, once you attempt suicide, and after he went to the med for his broken leg, he was going to psych evaluation. So we couldn't get any information to give his family a Christmas. And we were all pretty down about it, but, here's this guy we're sitting at the engine house, warm, having a good, and here's a guy that's so despondent because he can't give his family anything. That's some of the high-rise stuff that we did.
Yeah, and then you said that's the emotion side that they don't teach you, and you can't teach that.
No, and
you can prepare, but you really can't.
Right.
Till you.
And you hear some of these guys these young guys, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me. This, somebody mangled in an automobile or decapitated or burned, and they say, there's nothing to it. Well, let me tell you, I've been retired 7 years, and it's more vivid to me now, some of the things, than back then. I will wake up at night thinking about some of the things, and there's one fire in particular, and I didn't come home and tell my family all this stuff, It was during the Hurricane Elvis, when the the windstorm came through and just devastated the city. There's so much radio traffic. I'm sure you remember that everybody was just dispatching themselves, and we were over at Methodist Central Hospital on an automatic alarm, and Tim Grigani, one of my men, came in and said, "Hey, Lieutenant, there's smoke, heavy smoke in the street out here." So we go jump on the pumper. We were in an old reserve pumper that day, and went 4 blocks down, and it was an apartment building on fire. There was hardly anybody in that building that spoke English, but mostly they were Laotians. I'm trying to radio, tell them we got heavy smoke, can't get through because of all the radio traffic for everything else in the city. So we were there by ourselves, and I ran up there, and this little Laotian lady, she probably wasn't 4'6", and she comes up to me, screaming and crying, and she's rocking her arms like a cradle. Her baby's in there. We dropped the pre-connect line, try to get in there and get the baby. We knew we were going to get burned. I mean, it was way too much fire, and we didn't have anybody coming. We couldn't nobody knew we were there with an infant trapped. We got in there, and before anybody got word, I think I finally got through the radio, "Hey, we need water. We're going to have water, and we've got someone trapped, blah, blah, blah." Well, we had people instantly then. But we were there by ourselves 15, 20 minutes. And anybody that's a fireman knows that's a long time. We couldn't find the baby. And of course, when it started clearing up, I found him. And he was a little bitty. And to this day, people say, these young kids and all that are on the job, and say, "That stuff's not going to bother me." Yeah, it will. It'll bother you. If it doesn't, there's something wrong with you. I mean, that's a living, breathing human being, and it was your responsibility to go get him, and you didn't. I mean, it was nothing we could have done anyway. He was gone. The baby was gone before we got there. But still, you're thinking, what could I have done different? And since the power was out, they had candles, and that's what started the whole thing. But that was such a bad day that day. I think there were 2 fatalities that day, and the 7s made one, and Snorkel 13 made the other. A tree crushed through a house and killed a man. They had to go extricate him.
You mentioned early on about Larry Mathis, this other firefighter, this other friend who kind of got you where you were. And you guys paralleled each other in so many different ways. And I have somebody who's also a lieutenant on the other shift, same apparatus, just another shift. Something that changed my perspective. I was gung-ho, always excited about filming firefighters. I was working on a little video project, and then this incident, which everyone knows is Regis Towers or 750 Adams hit, kind of rocked my world because I never really thought about how dangerous the job could be. I think I had been with your crew multiple times going places. Mm-hmm. And there was this building, 750 Adams, that you guys went to over and over and over and over again. At the time, the fire department in Memphis had just gone from what I call the classic look of a hodgepodge of who knows what everybody was wearing. Everybody wore different turnouts, different things, and all of a sudden, everybody had new turnouts. I think they're trying to establish some new command structures.
Yes.
Incident command was coming into place. You guys had just been given pass devices. That was brand new. I can remember hearing about that. I'm not wearing that. Hoods at the time, nobody wanted to wear those either. It was a different time and a different place. I had a radio system that was, I would say at that point, was archaic. Wasn't very sophisticated. It's the same system that had been around for I don't know how long. It was just a different time. Tell me about it. There was this one day, April 11th, 1994. You were off duty, weren't you?
Yeah, I'd gone off at 7 o'clock that morning, and Larry and I used to course, we were best friends. I mean, families grew up together. We had a side job together. We just, never had a brother, but he was closest, Every morning, we'd walk each other out to the truck to leave, whichever one. I've been going through some stuff at that time, and first thing he was a devout Christian.
And you knew it.
You knew it.
Yeah.
He didn't talk it, he walked it. There's no doubt. I said, Larry, man, say a prayer for me today. Say a prayer for me today. And he always knew if I was having problems. I knew when he was having problems. And that was the last thing I said to him. I said, I'll see you in the morning. Anyway, this building is just problematic. It's horrible. It was every day is something. The residents were not cooperative about anything. 1 o'clock, midnight, around there, the alarm came in, typical, same thing. Ended up being a terrible fire. They were on their way up. The driver reported, said, I see a little smoke at the other end of the building. And they got up there, and it was one room on fire, or one apartment on fire, and it was blowing out. Now, he couldn't find it. It was short. There were some mistakes made. There's no doubt. There's so many good things that came out of this, but there was mistakes made. But I mean, I would have done the same thing. Anybody else would have done the same thing. Larry went to find the fire.
Just as normal. And again,
yeah, this is normal. This is normal.
Again, people always ask about that. Well, I hate to say it, the routine stop for everybody in the sevens, especially in the companies around there. This is not I heard that over and over again.
Yeah.
How many times you guys went there?
Whenever 750 Adams came in, or 741 Adams, or any of those, everybody just, gosh, I mean, when is this going to stop? And a lot of it was faulty maintenance, alarm systems bad, just, but this time there was actually something to it, and, they all dropped down, put their mask on to find the fire, told his man to get down the hallway, get through the door, and stand pipes down there. The elevator doors actually closed before one of his other men could get out. It was tragic. He lost his life along with his private. It was like you see something developed in the movies, which, nothing's real in the movies, but they were bringing people down off a 100-foot ladder, a 100-foot aerial that was not even supposed to reach that tall.
Yeah.
They brought people down out of the snorkel basket. They actually rescued the lieutenant and the private on the snorkel that went up with the pumper crew. And
a lot of people were rescued in that fire. People forget about that.
Right. It was, and it was arson, and plus, just willfully leaving a door open to blast across a hallway and all that. But they found Larry, they found Billy, who was his private. He was actually in the hallway, and the other crews coming up. You were talking about the archaic radio system. Well, they kept calling for him, his call sign, his call number, Larry's, and he wasn't answering. This was his private that ended up dying. He was calling for him, and he wouldn't answer, and that was the last thing you heard from him, was him calling for his lieutenant. When he was found, actually another engine company had laid the hand line and was progressing down the hallway, absolutely crawled over him, and he had become entangled in cable wire. New codes came out after that too. It was encased in plastic, and it just melted, and the cable fell, and he got entwined with that. So they were making their way down the hall, and all of a sudden, this blast comes out and drives them all out. They honestly thought they'd lost another whole engine company up there. But no sign of Larry. They had the fire put out, of course, heavy smoke. One of the lieutenants he wasn't a lieutenant then, he heard this chirp, chirp, chirp. And it was the new pass devices. It was Larry's pass device. He went to that sound, and he found Lieutenant Mathis in a room. They brought him out, and they had found Billy by this time, his private. They brought Larry down a snorkel. They raised the basket up, put him on a stretcher, and they worked him all the way down. They got him to the ground and put him in an ambulance. And matter of fact, I think our director now actually was working on him.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
As she was new. Anyway, they took him to the med and worked him, and he did not survive, and neither did the private Billy. You know, when you tell somebody, hey, I'll see you in the morning, you know, I did see him that next morning, but he wasn't alive. His wife came up there, and we went in to see him together. You're saying, how did I end up down there? When the fire came in, and they had already been injured, I was in bed, and I got a phone call from one of the chiefs and said, we need you to report to the 7s. Well, they don't do that kind of stuff, you know. I said, what's wrong? They said, well, Lieutenant Mathis, we've had some firefighters injured. And I said, well, I'm assuming it's Lieutenant Mathis then, because you wouldn't be calling me. He said, yes, Lieutenant Mathis. And we've got another one injured. You got Private Randy Hilliard coming in with you.
So you knew something was up.
Yeah, it was
point.
2:00 in the morning,
Yeah.
1:30 in the morning, and my family's all upset. They know that this is not normal. And, anyway, I got another phone call from the same chief, and he said, we don't need you to report to the engine house. Get your turnouts and report to the fire scene. And I said, you got to tell me something. I can't just, you know, you got to tell me what's going on. And he said, we don't know if they're going to make it.
And they want you to come to the fire scene at that point.
My wife got up, and I asked if they'd been notified, the families, and they had somebody en route to pick Larry's wife up. And so my wife got up and got dressed and drove over. It's just a few blocks from here. And that's how I ended up there.
But they did redirect you at some point not to go to the fire scene. Is that what it was?
No, I actually was at the fire scene, and some of the people were questioning what I was doing there because they knew how close we were. Said, you know, and they said, what do you need to do? The director came to me and said, what do you want? And I said, I want to go to the burn center. And he said, Jim, he's gone. I said, wow. It's still, you know, it's not registering. So I said, well, his wife's going to be there, so I want to be. So the chief took me over, and Debbie was just as calm. His wife is just as calm. She's just sitting there just as calm as she can be. And she looked at me, and I broke down. And she came over and put her arm around me and said, it's going to be okay. And I'm thinking, boy, what kind of man am I? I came to comfort this woman. And she's keeping me from falling apart.
By the way, that story was repeated over and over and over again. I've heard more firefighters tell me what Debbie did for them. Just about a year or two ago, one firefighter who was there on the company with him told me the very same thing and said that I was able to move on because she kept showing up, bringing us stuff, and let us know it's okay.
Yeah.
And I was able to go and move on because of that. That again, that shows you the strength.
She wanted to go and see him, and I said, Debbie, I just don't think you can do that. And I stepped out, and one of the surgeons or whoever it was there, and I said, can we see him? He said, well, we need to clean him up a little bit. They gave us a few minutes, and they came in and said, okay, and I asked Debbie, I said, are you positive you want to do this? I mean, I hadn't seen him either.
Yeah.
And, so we walked in there, and he's, you know, laying there, and just looks like he's asleep except for a few burns. She looked over, and she put her hand on his cheek, and just this little bitty drop of blood came out of his nose. She said, I know you're not there. I know you're in a better place. That's how strong a woman she is. But after that, things changed. New command system, got new radios, new procedures. Actually, some of the building codes changed.
Shortly after that, but I remember riding with you and your crew.
Yes.
And got you guys, just a few weeks after this had happened, going up and down a building very similar to that one. I remember you talking about it at that point, because before you were a little bit blasé about this stuff. You were doing everything by the book like I'd never seen. But what was going through my head every time was that this could be the same thing that could happen.
Exactly.
And at that point, things were going to change, but they had not changed. I can remember watching you working with that radio system and Seems like you were having problems getting out of that building. That was an amazing time. Just to bring this forward, my son talks about the things that they wear, the SOPs they do. He's looked at a lot of that footage and the things of the time. He said, all this came out of that incident, 750 Adams. He said, it's like, it's not forgotten, never will be. You played a pretty big role in that, I thought.
There were some mistakes made.
Sure.
Everybody knows this.
Yeah, but not one or not two, and it wasn't one or two people,
Right.
persons.
Right.
It was just across the board.
Across the board. And there are so many positives, and you think, why does it have to be a tragedy for something like this to happen? But what happened there over the years has probably saved other people's lives.
Nothing was in vain.
No. And I know you mentioned even the hoods. I hated the hood. I absolutely.
You're one of the ones that said,
Yeah,
I hate those.
I hate them. I mean, that was my ears are my temperature gauge. My ears
Yeah.
tell me when to get out. These scars prove that I've got some, scar. But everything that came out was for the betterment of not only civilians, but the firefighters. I mean, if you can't take care of your firefighters first, they can't take care of anybody else. I know Larry's air mask was damaged. I mean, through the investigations and all. And that, I think, focus on the air mask and the pass devices was probably as big to me as the radio communication problems we were having. There were some big changes. I think it's still evolving to this day. But that was the actual start of the high-rise system.
Things had changed where you would make a run. If it's on the 8th floor, the reported fire, you would stop. You would not go up on that
Correct.
floor. There are little things like that. I've heard even those things coming from my own son, well thought, well planned,
Right.
to ever prevent kind of what happened from happening ever again.
Those were implemented. We actually made a fire on the 19th floor of a building on Bellevue, and we could see the fire on the way to the building. Naturally, we did not get on the elevator. So that's 19 floors, 2 flights per floor with gear. And we got up there. It was a second alarm. We got up there. We snuffed it out. When it's all over with, walked over to look at the elevator, and the doors are completely warped. So if those precautionary things that we do, if it hadn't been in place, yeah, it could have been another fatality, firefighter fatality. Because it was the whole floor, and it was a circular building, was burned from 3 feet off the ground all the way to the ceiling. So nobody would have survived that. So those, once again, the new rules and regulations probably prevented someone from doing it, even though you could have said, well, we can ride up a few floors and then get off. No, you can't. You never know. Malfunction, whatever. But
The discussion was, this is what we do. And who wants to ride, who wants to go up those floors? I mean, that was
right.
pretty common at the time.
Well, and you're making 6 or 7 high rises a day minimum. So, you got complacent, and that particular building too, there was only 2 elevators, and 9 times out of 10, only one of them was working.
You were talking about the emotions, and they can't teach you that, can they?
No, they can't.
How did that change you? Because it's really interesting to me because I understood you were very determined that was not going to happen again at that engine house. It was almost like you made that a mission in your mind. But how did that change you at that point?
Well, basically, I just thought nothing could happen. I'm going to take care of my men. Nothing's going to happen to us. You make this stuff all the time. Nothing's going to happen, blah, blah, blah. Even at the fires, hey, we're all Supermen, We're surrounded by, the one thing about that engine house is that all the engine houses around it were staffed with tough firemen. So we always knew if you get in a bind, one of these companies coming in, 11s, the 8s, the 14s, 2s, all around us we had good firemen, and we knew that we're going to be okay. But after that, I said, I don't know if we're going to be okay, And I really became so more aware of little things, and not taking stuff for granted. I guess the word is complacency. When you leave and you've got a 1-story frame or a 2-story balloon or any, we know how to handle that. But high rises are different. They are. They're just a different animal, and you make so many of them, and you think, well, here's one that's on fire this time. Still nothing's going to happen. And then you take the simplest thing, and this is what happens. So I became more conscious about the safety of my guys, because I think pretty much all of them will tell you we've probably been in places that we shouldn't be. But I did tell them, I said, if I tell you to go, don't waste any time. Let's go, there's an interesting story there. But anyway, it changed my mindset. Even though you can be surrounded by good firefighters, you can still get yourself in trouble, or things can happen. And I think another change on that job, they didn't have the thermal cameras. I think only the squad might have had them. That camera actually saved our lives one night, this many years later. But that was something else that came about. We're going to get these cameras and help us out a little bit.
And now every single firefighter on the job
firefighter has their own
a thermal imaging camera, TIC.
Correct.
In Memphis.
And that's I didn't believe in those either. I was the old school, didn't like the hood. I didn't like to wear my gloves, and this thermal camera, what's this all about? And I finally got to where I was carrying. I thought, well, that thing does work. But it actually saved our lives down on a second alarm fire on Front Street one night. We had I think it was a lightning strike, and we got there. We were ordered to relieve one of the companies inside the building, and they were deep inside the building. Came off, and I picked the camera up, and we're following and get to the end of the hose line, and can't see anything. Cannot see one thing. No fire. It's hot. Terrible smoke. No fire. And something's not right then. And we still were advancing a little bit, and I turned the camera on. I said, well, I'm going to find this. And I put it right over our heads, and it went white. The whole camera went white. It was too hot for the camera. I said, let's go. We probably would have gone another 100, well, not 100 feet, probably 50 feet in if we could have, but it was time to go. And when I said go, I said, don't even take the hose line. But we're not worried about it. Just get on that hose line. Let's get out of here. Well, I ran out of air on the way out. I had 3 of my guys in front of me, and they got out. Actually, I thought I was out. I saw some light, and I looked up, and I reached up, and it was actually a window with bars. I do not remember getting out of that building. I do not. The doorway was only 10 feet from that window, but I was out of the building. A fireman will always tell you, hey, man, I saved you. I got you out of there, And I went around to everybody, and I said, did you get me out of here? Well, I think it was Larry. But to tell the whole thing about this story was that camera, what it did and what it does do today, and the progress that's been made on it. But as soon as we came out, the people were saying the same thing on the other side. There was another Snorkel 13 actually was on the other side, and they had the same experience. When we're all sitting outside with this blank stare on our face, something's happened inside, because nobody, that stare. Because we weren't out 5 minutes before the whole thing blew. Just fire blew out of every window, every door. So it was just technology probably saved our lives that night. It was a moment that I only had 2 or 3 of those moments on the job, but that was one of them where I didn't know if I was gonna
make it out.
Yeah.
There's a term I've heard. It's called survivor's guilt. If anybody probably went through that, I think I witnessed that a little bit with you, but you got out, you lived, and somebody else you knew didn't. Whether you were there or not, You know, as I think about this with 750 and Larry, how do you deal with that?
I'm going to tell you, I still think about it to this day, Tom. To this day. Why wasn't it me? You know, I wouldn't have done anything different than Larry did. So we were just alike. But I kept thinking, this man is probably one of the finest men. I was allowed to be his friend. That's the way I look at it. I mean, I was allowed to be this guy's friend. You know, God let me be this man's friend. I'm going, why him? I wrestle with it every day. My whole family will tell you that. His family will tell you. I mean, it just, and the thing I thought, and I when I spoke at his funeral, the thing that really I think gets me through this is the fact that he was such a strong Christian. That was number one. Number two, he surrounded his family. He put his arms around his family. Number three, he was the best friend you could have. I'm glad I had him that long. And number four, he was a fantastic fireman, unbelievable fireman. But it was in that order. And I thought, so what was his priority? His Christianity was his priority. And I wasn't living like that. And that's why I struggle. I struggle with it. I said, why not me? He's so much better man. Why did it take Larry Mathis? You know,
because you look back and now you realize that it changed you. He was prepared and you were not.
Yeah, it changed a lot of lives.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It changed a lot.
Hardened people. It changed.
You can't say it any better than that. And there were men that worked with him on his shift that it just completely, you know, and they questioned too. There was one of the men on the truck. I love the man to death. He hadn't been there a month when this happened, and he was actually one of them that was the firefighter was pulled from the building by the snorkel. I mean, was rescued. Of course, nobody had ever been in. You know, he'd never been in a situation like that. Most people. And I know he just kept saying to me after it was over with, they all was saying, we're so sorry. We're also telling me. And I said, I'm sorry for him because you didn't get to know him like I did. He changed. He's a changed man. I mean, to this day, I hate that they didn't get to really know him. After that fire, you know, I left the med and they took Debbie home and I came back to Sevens. They were all sitting out in front. My shift had just come on. They had just gotten them back in service. They'd been out of service all morning. The vocal went off the minute I walked in. Apartment on fire. They said, well, can Sevens take that? Yeah, we'll take it. And it was actually in somebody else's territory. And we had a little fire, smoke. It wasn't that much to it. There was a lot of smoke. And I actually put my face piece on this lady and walked her down the stairs. I mean, it wasn't that it was going to choke her, but she was coughing and all. And I said, I can't do it. I can't do it. And we went back. I put us out of service. I said, I can't do this. And I didn't know if I could go do it again. They said, well, you're going to be liaison for the family, doing the funeral arrangements for Larry. Sitting there talking to Debbie in their backyard. She started crying. And I said, oh, wow, you know. And I said, Debbie, what is it? I said, I've leaned on you for this 36 hours. What is it that I can do? She said, oh, I'm just mad at him. I said, what do you mean you're mad at him? She said, he got to heaven before I did. Well, there you go. Now I fall apart, you know. But that's the kind of person that he was. It's just such a profound effect on everybody. My wife and a bunch of my men have always said, why didn't you ever leave the Sevens before you retired? Why do you stay up there and take that beating? Because I'm the only one left that knew Larry. And then one guy told me finally, he said, Larry will always be known. He will always be known. And so I worked down there 26 years, about 20 years too much. But when I left, we have the big memorial on the board up there. There's been 5 firefighters that lost their lives from Engine 7. it's just a crazy feeling to retire anyway. I walked through the engine house, and I just looked at that board, and I said, no, you won't be forgotten. You won't be. That was my career. There were so many things that we did and mentored people, and a couple of the street guys that we were like family, you know, and there's some really funny stories too, not just trying to be so emotional here, but there were some really funny times up there too, but it had to do with helping people too. We had a kid who came from a broken home up there, and he used to come by every day, and we would make him study. We would sit there and make him study. He could not go home unless he was studying. Studied up there, got in high school, and he made the football team, White Station football team. Well, he's African American. I just loved him to death. They were playing Bartlett for opening game, and Melvin was small, but he was tough. He was the running back. So all of us got together from the engine house. We went to the game, sat over there in the middle of the White Station crowd. Now, we did stick out, because there's only, it was like 8 white and 2 blacks of us, you know. And we're a group in the middle there, and every time Melvin, when he ran on the field, hey, Mel, you know. And finally, one of the dads behind said, man, who are y'all? I said, we're Melvin's dad. All of us. And anyway, he finished. He got a little football scholarship, junior college, and I think he ended up finally, he ended up on the fire department somewhere in Mississippi.
You never know.
You never know, yeah. Just
lessons learned. If you were going to tell younger firefighters if it's getting help when they need it, or what about it on the job, what would you actually tell them after all the years and the things you've been through?
Don't think that you're a Superman and it won't happen to you. Also, don't think you're a Superman emotionally and you can bottle all this up and it doesn't affect you and you can be the man, you know. That's so false. That's just so false. It does not happen. I don't care who you say you are, you know. And the other thing I think is just you can't take things for granted. Just don't. I'm talking about for granted just coming home to your family. Not that, well, this building's never been a problem to us. It won't be a problem here. I'm not talking about that being taken for granted. Just not taking for granted that you're going to come home. Because once you see it, it'll never leave you. I saw my best friend, and he never came home that next day. You better enjoy the camaraderie and not make it an adversarial thing in the engine house. If you have a problem with somebody in that engine house, straighten it out. White, black, religion, female, politics, it doesn't make any difference. You are a family, and you take care of one another because nobody else cares. I'm going to say nobody, but firefighter and policemen are liabilities to the municipality. I feel like that's what is projected. But you know, the policemen know that you're going to be there when somebody calls for help, you know. And I just, you got to be one and the same fireman. You're not white, you're not black. You're not Baptist, you're not you're a fireman when you're there, and don't ever forget it. So if you got petty difference in an engine house, solve it. Solve it. I mean, it's just, there's no reason not to. That's your family right there.
Jim Cunningham, retired lieutenant with the City of Memphis Fire Department, D7's lieutenant. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Tom.
The cost of being a firefighter. A conversation with retired Memphis firefighter Lieutenant Jim Cunningham. I want to remind you can check out some videos featuring Jim Cunningham on our website at EmergencyFD.com. That's EmergencyFD.com. And while you're there, help support the production of EmergencyFD Storyline, this podcast, With a donation of any amount, it would be appreciated. If you would like to contact Emergency FD Storyline with comments or to suggest a story or a subject for an upcoming podcast, email us at storyline@emergencyfd.com. That's storyline@emergencyfd.com. I'm Tom Mann, and I want to thank you for listening. There are many stories coming on Emergency FD Storyline. Join us.